Hello, Peter4789 Sirus here, and welcome to Sirus Gaming Corner, a game podcast where I, Swordfish1390, and usually Force Reviews, talk about various gaming topics, from new games to old games. Everything is fair game as far as discussion goes. I say usually Force since he's not here today, and for quite a while since he's out for a business trip. But well, we still have Sword here, so how you doing, Sword?
Not bad. We'll have to make it the dynamic duo instead of the Three Musketeers today, so...
So, for today's topic, since Xenoblade 3, we just got like a release date on it, and it's actually this summer? Strangely enough.
Can't remember the last time there was actually a push forward instead of a push back for a game.
Do you remember the times when we had to wait for localization times? Back in like the PS3 era?
Okay, and then it gets pushed back and back and back and back, and it never stops.
But yeah, since Xenoblade 3 is coming out, Sword thought it would be a good time to talk about the Operation Rainfall game, since, well, it's through Operation Rainfall influence that we had Xenoblade 1 fun to talk about all of the games of Operation Rainfall to have come out. So, like, if you guys aren't, like, know what Operation Rainfall is, Operation Rainfall was basically, like,
Like, there was a bunch of fans who got together and kind of made like a big uproar about wanting those three games localized: Xenoblade, Last Story, and Pandora's Tower, because they localized them in the UK, but it looked like we weren't going to get them, and it's thanks to Operation Rainfall's efforts that we managed to get them localized over here. But Xenoblade wouldn't be the big hit that it is now if it wasn't for them.
It is pretty interesting how like those three games got selected. They don't really have anything in common with each other when you get down to it.
Yeah, three very different games, three totally different companies from each other, not even by the same developer, and those three in particular, all on the Wii, funnily enough, that only got UK releases at first, and then we got them. So it's really odd how that worked out, because it's like you said, they have nothing to do with each other.
Yeah. Well,
because you got one that's basically like an offline MMO, another one's an action RPG, another one's like in the vein of Castlevania, so they couldn't be more different.
Well, I guess we should talk about. Do you want to talk about Xenoblade first or last? You think?
I was thinking we could do that last, only because that's like the big one.
Okay, I guess let's talk about the last story then. The last story. People really do want to make a big deal out of the last story. You know why?
Is it because it has like some of the Final Fantasy veterans attached to it?
Sakaguchi.
Yeah. To be fair, I think Sakaguchi does a lot of good work with his games for the most part.
Yep. I haven't really played, like, he done all the Final Fantasy games, but I haven't really played many of the old school Final Fantasy games. Like, my favorite is like Final Fantasy Tactics, but I'm not sure he worked on that one.
I don't think he did. I mean, I want to assume maybe at best he might have had like maybe supervision or something, but otherwise I don't think he had much of a role in that game.
I played Final Fantasy 7 and really liked it.
Mm-hmm.
Final Fantasy 8, though.
That's a game for another day, I think.
Okay. So, I'm not as enamored with Sakaguchi like other people are. But I do recognize his impact and how talented he is. But then again, Lost Odyssey, and you know how we all feel about that game.
It's all right.
So, what do we think of the last story?
I like it. I think it's pretty good.
I feel like it's if it was localized like any other JRPG, I probably say it wouldn't have gotten as renowned as it is currently. Even if as harsh as that sounds.
Like, considering the fact that it's one of the Operation Rainfall games, so therefore it kind of got a lot more publicity than it normally would have.
Yeah.
Yeah, that sounds about right.
I feel like it feels like an incredibly safe game to me.
Yeah, it is. It doesn't really do anything terribly new, but I think that what it does, though, it executes it well, even if it's a lot of it is, say par for the course for JRPGs.
Yeah, I guess, but then like it's very safe, from its setting to its characters to its story. It's like if you want if you want to like a poster child for like safe JRPGs, I would say the last story fit that description to a T.
Yeah, I agree. It's a simple story, but I think it was I still think it was pretty interesting for what it does. Like you could do a lot worse. Like I was, I'm playing this and I'm like, okay, yeah, I've seen a lot of games do stuff like this before, but I thought it was good. I still, and I think that the characters also, like, even though, like you said, that they're pretty safe, and we kind of seen characters like that before, I still think that they have, like, a good dynamic, and I still was attached to the characters.
I'd probably say the game's at its best in its side stories, actually, when they're just doing various missions and interacting with each other. It's just some pretty good chemistry and dialogue there, especially since, like, it's not like typical JRPG dialogue. It has this more, I guess Xenoblade as well has this more European, British.
Yeah.
I don't know.
Understand. Yeah, since it was localized in the UK, it's got like characters all with British accents, British localization. But like I think the writing and dialogue is like really good, and it's like with the side stories, like with the little hidden optional chapters you could do. I think that's when the writing like kind of hits its peak. Is when, like, I think one of my favorite ones is like I think they go to like a haunted mansion or something, and that whole thing is just so silly, and I absolutely loved it.
Yeah, I think
that was a great moment.
Like the last story is good when it feels like a restrained adventure.
Because it's not like it's a fairly like small scaled story. Like it mostly takes place in like one setting, and a lot of the events are like really. There's not really like a world-ending scenario, if I'm remembering right.
It's still like you save the kingdom sort of stuff. And that part still feels really, really typical. But I'd probably say like when they're out just doing their mercenary work is where it does feel the most charming.
Yeah. So I think that in terms of like the actual writing and dialogue and story and stuff, I think that it does have a lot going for it, even if it is safe. I would say that if I compare it to like other Mistwalker games, I think that story-wise I enjoyed Last Story more than Lost Odyssey.
Oh boy.
Although Lost Odyssey does have a thing going for it with the dream sequences. They're beautiful.
Like Last Story's problem is that it can feel meandering at the start.
But
then it's also kind of hampered by the villain at the end too. So I don't know.
Which was so obvious, by the way.
Yeah. In terms of the character dynamic, like I said, I think they're pretty cool. But I think the one that stands out to me the most is through the main character, Zale, and through like the mentor character, which is
Dagran.
Yeah, Agron. Yeah.
Yeah, they had a good dynamic. Like, like you felt like I felt like Dagran was like kind of like a big brother figure to Zale. It's funny because it almost kind of mirrors Shulk and Dunban in Xenoblade when in a way.
Yeah. I think the more interesting thing to talk about in the last story is probably its combat system.
It's actually really ironic because the combat seems to be like one of the most renowned aspects of that game, but in my opinion, I thought the combat was really frustrating.
Like all the games in Operation Rainfall, I got. But then again, Pandora's Tower got this chain mechanic you have to use the nunchuck. But I feel like the last story's combat system tried to utilize the Wii's control scheme to the best as it could.
Yeah.
But to the game's detriment in some ways, since the controls isn't as tight as it can be.
Yes, sometimes I just feel like the controls aren't always super responsive. And when I'm attacking, I don't always feel like my hits are connecting. Like I feel like enemies block a lot, and it feels like I'm hitting like a brick wall, and it doesn't feel like very satisfying, and it feels like really sloppy. And my God, is the slowdown bad? Like, borderline Last Remnant sometimes. And the other thing too is that there's just not a whole lot to it. Like, a lot of it is button mashing. Like, there's no, like, there's not any combo potential you could do. Like, this is nowhere near a Tales game or anything like that. Like, there's no combo videos you're gonna look up, because it's like I said, it's just mindless button mashing. Like, you got some cool things with like the was like that Gale Slash.
Yeah, I think like when you combine magic with Zao's sword techniques is where it gets interesting.
Yeah, that's cool.
Yeah,
but I feel like, but the melee combat though, when you're just like swinging your sword, it just feels awfully clunky.
But yeah, besides like being able to like combine characters' abilities together using Zao, and then I think it's also interesting how you party members in the battle and let them, so to give you some sort of control in terms of how to fight a battle, and give it more a strategic element to it.
But that besides, I do like the game pauses and you can manually like input some commands for your characters, which that was good. I like that.
Yeah. And like, isn't there like an aggro system in the game?
I feel like there was, but I haven't played it in a while, so I don't remember exactly. I feel like there was something like that though.
And I think that it is cool how you can like use the environment to like use a wall jump attack, sort of.
Yeah, that was cool, and you could even take cover behind stuff, behind like certain walls, which I don't think I've seen that in like a JRPG, you know, and I can't think of anything like that. So that was interesting.
Like the most like direct comparison I can make is probably with like Judgment, in terms of like Yagami's wall strike abilities.
Yeah, that's a pretty accurate comparison.
Yeah. But even then, like, it isn't really put up much in this game and in Judgment. But besides that, I don't really feel like Last Story is all that memorable to me as a game.
Yeah, I think I enjoyed it a tad more than you did, but I still acknowledge that it's not like a spectacular 10 out of 10 RPG or anything. Like, especially like the Wii doesn't have a whole lot of RPGs on it, so like if you have a Wii and you still got it, you haven't played it, yeah, check it out. You could do a lot worse.
Yeah, like at its worst, it's safe. At its best, it's a charming little game, little JRPG that it doesn't do anything offensively bad. And it's quite
pretty short.
It's pretty short.
Yeah, you could beat it in like 15 or 20 hours.
Anything else to talk about the Last Story?
I was maybe like technical stuff. Like, I think graphically it looks pretty good for a Wii game.
I would probably say like this goes for all the Operation Rainfall games, but the color palette on these Operation Rainfall games feel pretty muted.
Yeah, I think it also comes just with the territory for a Wii, though.
Yeah.
But for what it is, though, for like I think like from a technical perspective, the graphics still look like pretty good, though. Like the raw graphical prowess. I would say
like the Last Story probably has like the best character models of all the Operation Rainfall games.
Yeah, I would agree.
Especially compared to Xenoblade.
Yeah, they were not. I'll just say this: when I played Xenoblade Definitive Edition, I look back on the Wii version. I'm like, I cannot believe I like thought that looked fairly decent.
Like Xenoblade Chronicles look great in the environmental design.
Yeah, that was where Xenoblade graphically shined the most.
And the cutscene cinematography was pretty tight as well in that game. It's just that the character models just feel like really off. Especially the eyes. The eyes in Xenoblade Chronicles just looks so off. Yeah, at least in the Wii version.
Yeah, definitive version really fixed the graphical issues. But I mean, I think we'll get to that when we talk about Xenoblade. I think the last thing about Last Story is music, which I think it's one of Uematsu's weakest soundtracks, personally.
I think it was good from when I first played it, but I can't really remember any tracks if you were to ask me.
I off the top of my head, I remember like maybe 2 tracks. That's about it. Like it feels like like Uematsu is such a great composer, and it's not bad at all. It just like it's in the background. Like it's so muted and it's there to complement the scenery, but that's really it. It doesn't really make its presence known.
Yeah, I would say that if the last story wasn't a game in Operation Rainfall and it was just localized normally, people probably wouldn't remember it as much, I think. Besides, that and it being made by Sakaguchi.
I was just about to say, like, I feel like it would still get a little bit more, it would still get some recognition only because it has Sakaguchi's name attached to it. Because contrary to our opinion, Lost Odyssey was super popular, so I feel like people would have been inclined to check it out more.
Yeah.
But yeah, overall, last story, pretty good. You know, not the best, but it's good.
It's like it's okay and okay to me. Pandora's Tower.
Yeah, I haven't played this one. So this one's all you.
Okay. Like, I think Pandora's Tower is probably more interesting than the last story. I think the story itself is okay, but the overall gameplay is really interesting in Pandora's Tower to me. It's like, it feels very, I guess, Legend of Zelda-ish in terms of how it goes through its combat. I think the tone is much more interesting than in the last story. Like, have you really seen
what I've seen some clips and stuff, and the tone seems more like melancholic and like sad in comparison.
Yeah. It's basically I think the way how you progress through the level is interesting too, since it does feel like sort of like a Dark Souls level kind of. In terms of, like, you keep progressing, like you basically, the game takes place in this tower, but like you have to like you need to think of how far you can progress, like if you want to go more, or like to like, since there's like a time limit sort of system in Pandora's Tower in terms of you needing to find hearts for the main character's love interests, and if you don't, it's basically a bad ending. So yeah, I think the game does a pretty good job of making the area progression feel significant in that game. Just because you have to weigh between how long you can stay in the tower and how many hearts you can, like the most efficient way to find like a monster that has a heart that you can feed to Eleonora, I think that's her name. I can't really remember. It's like years since I played Pandora's Tower.
What happens if you don't feed her? Like, is it a game over?
You get a bad ending.
Oh, okay.
There's like multiple endings in Pandora's Tower, if I remember correctly. I'd probably say like the combat is much more traditional than in the last story or in even Xenoblade Chronicles, but I think that's not a bad thing. Especially since like the last story's combat can feel pretty frustrating at the worst of times. And the last story's combat does feel like it's trying to utilize the Wii's control scheme more rather than actually being an engaging experience at times. And I feel in that game. Why in like Pandora's Tower gameplay, like in terms of the combat, it feels very basic in terms of in terms of melee combat, since you basically have like a variety of weapons you can choose, and those melee attacks are pretty basic. But I think where the game's trying to most is with the chain mechanic, because the game utilizes the chain in a lot of varied ways that makes playing through the game to be still interesting. It has like specific enemy types where you can use the chain in unique and different ways in how you fight them. I think that makes the game play a lot better than in the last story. Especially in the last story, since every combat encounter can feel samey as you play that game more.
Yeah, based on gameplay that I've seen, Pandora's Tower looks like it has a lot more like variety in its combat and gameplay
and like
exploration.
Pandora's Tower got like a variety of enemy types, bosses you fight, and it all utilizes the chain mechanic in engaging in varied ways that makes playing through the Pandora's Tower, at least to me, a lot more fun than it was in the last story.
Yeah, if I feel like I do plan on getting around to it at some point, I feel like I'll definitely prefer the gameplay at least of Pandora's Tower over last story.
Besides that, I can't remember. Like, it's been years since I played Pandora's Tower. But I've at least remembered that I'd like playing Pandora's Tower more than the last story. Actually, I really like playing through Pandora's Tower. It's just been like bit of time, let's just say, since I last played Pandora's Tower. But I remember liking the combat system that revolved around the chain mechanic. I really like progressing through each tower, since they have intricate level design that feels very akin to like a Legend of Zelda game, kind of, in terms of how you progress the game, and especially the boss encounters. I thought the music was pretty cool when I first played for the game. The story is whatever to me. And the visuals, I would probably say this is where Pandora's Tower probably lacked the most in the Operation Rainfall games. Having said that, I probably do like Pandora's Tower visuals more, just because of the setting and the like tone difference.
Mm-hmm. I remember like seeing when I watched some clips. Something that's in terms of like at least graphics is the fact that when what's her name? I think when she starts to become more monstrous, she gets like really like disgusting and ugly and grotesque. Seeing her like eat like the meat of monsters, that's like it was like disgusting. But I thought it was great though, like in the best possible way. That stood out to me.
But yeah, that's all I can really remember of the game.
I get the feeling that it seems like Pandora's Tower is like
the chain also does. The game also does like the area progression also ties with the chain. It makes like area progression to feel interesting. I forgot to add that. But yeah, it does feel very Legend of Zelda-ish in terms of how you progress the levels.
It feels like Pandora's Tower almost seems like it's more gameplay driven, whereas last story is more like story driven.
Yeah. Yeah, there's not really much characters in Pandora's Tower.
Isn't it? It's really just like the two, like I think Aaron and Elena, isn't it? They're pretty much like it, aren't they?
Yeah, for the most part. And we get down to it. I'm not even really sure you would call Pandora's Tower an RPG, since like it feels very more, I guess, Legend of Zelda, like I said.
Like it's more like an action game with maybe some RPG elements.
Yeah, like there is an upgrading system, but yeah. But overall, I really do like Pandora's Tower.
Yeah. If anything, talking about it made me want to dust off my Wii and probably check it out, because I beat the other two Operation Rainfall games, but have not touched Pandora's Tower. It's been collecting dust for like years, so I think after talking about it now, it's probably time to boot it up and see what it's all about.
Yeah. So I guess let's talk about Xenoblade 1.
Yeah, talk about the big one, the feature presentation.
Do you think we should talk about Xenoblade 2 as well?
We could probably dive into it a little bit. I was thinking we could maybe like make a separate video talking about maybe both games in detail and maybe what we expect from Xenoblade 3.
Okay. Xenoblade 1. What do you think of this game, Sor?
Personally, I love it. I think it's great in just about everything, for the most part. I think the story's like really well done. It's got a lot of twists and revelations. I think are really well executed for the most part. Characters are kind of whatever to me. They're okay. Some are better than others, but not like the best cast in the world. But they're fine. I love the MMO-esque combat. All the different cooldowns and timers and stuff you need to keep track of. It's a really huge world. There's tons to find. Like you could explore one zone for like a dozen hours in itself. I'm not even exaggerating. Like the Gour Plain, that one of the first areas you go to, I spent probably like 15 hours exploring it all and doing every quest I could find, and I still probably had more to do that I missed. So like you could play my final playtime when I beat the game the first time, I had like I think over 200 hours. So there is a ton of content in terms of quests and things to find and exploring all of the maps individually, and and it's got some cool upgrading systems, and the music is stellar. So I think it's a pretty top tier game all around.
Overall, I say I really like the game. I think it's a pretty good to great game. I probably say I don't think it's the masterpiece like some people do.
It's got. I mean, it's not perfect. There's a couple things that kind of bother me, but
I think the most notable thing of Xenoblade Chronicles is the exploration. The exploration is really, really good at that game. All the areas are varied, handcrafted. Each area feels like its own identity. And it's really fun to explore and rewarding too, just based on how the game rewards experience points in terms of how much you explore in the game. And I do like how it's not just wide, just like a lot of verticality to Xenoblade Chronicles. And it's a really interesting world to explore too, just because it takes place on top of two dead titans, which is these gigantic beings. And you're just like an ant compared to these gigantic beings, just living on off the bodies of these supposedly dead titans.
Yeah, like when you get down to it, like all of the different races of the Bionis Mechanis, you're basically just like fleas in the grand scheme of things. They're just bugs that kind of started life on the corpses, or what we think are the corpses of titans. Like it's really creative and interesting.
Yeah.
And finding out like the mystery of like what they are and where they came from, that was really interesting too, I thought.
And the story, I think it was really good. I especially think it's interesting to just learn more about the Bionis and Mechonis, the two dead titans, and how the people build the town around like specific areas. I think that's interesting. I think the war between Mechonis and Mechonis is done really well, especially like how it relates to Shulk's journey in terms of him like being this pretty normal dude who just really interested in researching the
Monado?
Either Monado. And then he just gets swept all up in by the events just because the Mechonis evades with their machines, and then like it kills a very close friend of Shulk, and then he's driven by revenge against Mechonis, and like the whole entire game is just against Mechonis and like in the story of kind of revenge, but then
eventually it turns out like it ends up kind of that revenge plot disappears because of a certain thing that happens like about the midway point. And I thought that was cool though because it shakes up the story a bit.
But then they found out more about Mechonis and how it's not black and white. And then like
that was another thing too. I like that it kind of flips the script on the relationship between the Bionis and Mechonis.
And then it does develop Shulk journey more in terms of him learning to get past his vengeance that he felt like he needed against Mechonis at the end. With that said, I do think the story just falls off at the last third. For me.
It gets all right. I'll admit it gets a little wild. It almost feels like the last dozen or so hours they got like a totally new writer in a way. Yeah. That said, I still think it was interesting personally. Like finding out. I think one of the cool things is finding it like there was these recurring creatures that appear throughout the story called Telethia, and finding about what they are and what their origin was actually like really not only was it interesting, it was also tragic. And finding out like what their true purpose was, and again, we also find out about like the true origin of the Bionis and Mechonis. I thought that was also really interesting and puts a new perspective on things. I think the only one like plot reveal that I thought was really kind of silly was about Albus at the end of the game.
Oh,
that was a little much for me. That was a little silly for me. But otherwise, overall, I think I agree that it's kind of love it or hate it. It really depends on who you ask about the last like third-ish of the game. But personally, I thought it shook all those twists and stuff. Kind of shook the game up in a bit. But whether it's good or bad really depends, I think, on who you ask. But I personally I found it interesting.
Oh yeah, Zanza sucks.
I still am not fully really sure what he was after. Maybe I haven't played in a long time, which I haven't, but
he's just, I don't know,
just really cartoonishly evil.
Yeah. But he's like the Pope character, antagonist in Xenoblade Saga 2.
Was it Xenoblade Saga 2? Oh yeah, that dude. Yeah, that sounds about right.
But you know what's the best thing about Xenoblade Saga 2 and Xenoblade Saga series? He's basically a blip in the grand scheme of things.
Yeah, he's like very inconsequential. Like he's just like in a way that guy was like a pawn kind of.
Yeah.
Actually, no, he was a pawn. Yeah, not kind of, he was. Yeah.
But yeah, which but is that the case in Xenoblade 1? Since like
Zanza's like the main antagonist, like literally he's the big bad. Yeah. Whereas in Xenoblade Saga 2, people can make fun of that game all they want, but like that dude, I thought it was cool in that game how they almost played him up to be like the big bad because he was like one of the leaders of that cult. Yeah. And then you're like, oh man, he's like the big guy behind everything, and he was just like I said before, he was like a pawn in the grand scheme of things, which I thought was a pretty cool way to flip the script.
But yeah, like Zanza, he just sucks.
Yeah, and he kind of comes out of nowhere, really, when you think about it. It's just,
I mean, it is interesting in terms of like, it's kind of interesting the parallels between him and Shulk.
Mm-hmm.
But but then that's just like a surface level thing.
Yeah, and we were talking about this before we recorded, but like, I agree that he's really made more interesting in Xenoblade 2. That's when his character actually shines, is when you play both Xenoblade games and you get to the end of Xenoblade 2. That's when they actually like do more with his character a bit.
You know what? I'm gonna say something really controversial.
Go for it.
Amalthus is better than Zanza.
I said it. Yeah.
I said it.
I agree.
It's true.
I agree. Because Amalthus, he's like more of a established character, and like his story was sad, and I felt for him, and I thought he was a good villain.
Just Zanza sucks so much, man.
He's not the best. As much as I love Xenoblade 1 and its story, I admit Zanza's not like
he's just
particularly good villain.
He's basically like Zanza is just basically typical. Like, you know how people just ridicule JRPGs, like, oh, you just defeat the
big bad,
the embodiment of God at the end. He's basically like that, Evil
Yeah,
God.
he kind of like embodies everything that certain people like to make fun of JRPGs for. He's like, ah ha ha, look at that game. See, JRPGs do suck, or, because then they'll point at like Zanza, and then he's like that guy. He's like he's like ammunition for like maybe haters of JRPGs.
I'll probably say like Xenoblade 1 and 2 like has a lot of side quests in it now.
Yeah, they're both huge. Like I will say Xenoblade 2 is not as big of a game as Xenoblade 1. Yeah. That said, it is still a very, very big game, and you can still play it for like well over 100 hours.
But
so
then
it's still massive.
I also say like the side quests can feel pretty monotonous.
Yes, in Xenoblade 1 more so, but 2 also falls into this category. Yeah. But like the side quests are just really redundant and
it's basically it's basically the typical JRPG side quest. Like
in the same way, like a good point of reference is like Nier. Like the quest in that game sucked, and Xenoblade Chronicles basically has those side quests, except there's about, I want to say, like 100 times more of them.
Yeah, but like in Nier, there's interesting character action every now and then.
Yeah, you'll get some amusing dialogue with the characters, which kind of makes them worthwhile.
Why Xenoblade? There's not really much. There's like lore building, I guess, but it's not really all that interesting.
Like there's very, very rare exceptions where side quests have a little like teeny tiny story attached to them that kind of makes them, but there are very few and far between. And about 99% of the side quests are literally just, hey, get me 5 of this, come back, thank you, here you go.
Hey, you know another controversial opinion?
Oh shoot, go for it.
The Blade stories are better.
Yeah, I like the Blade stories. that was a good thing about Xenoblade 2, is that the Blade quests, they're really entertaining and interesting, and they flesh them out. Because
like I can remember a lot of the Blade stories and the side quests in Xenoblade 2. I can't remember any side quests in Xenoblade 1.
No, like the quests in Xenoblade 1 are really just busy work. Like it's basically just checking off boxes in your quest list. Whereas Xenoblade 2, don't get me wrong, they still have a good amount of side quests that do kind of fall into that category, especially when you just accept them from NPCs, but a lot of them have like a little bit more to them, especially the Blade quests. So Xenoblade 2 doesn't have as many side quests in terms of like just sheer quantity, but the quality of each quest is generally better.
The characters now. Oh boy.
Another controversial hot take. Another controversial hot take. Xenoblade 2 cast better than 1.
Like,
just gonna say it right now.
I would probably say Xenoblade 2 characters have a more consistent cast than Xenoblade 1. That makes it better. But Xenoblade 1, like, I think Shulk is a really good main protagonist. Dunban,
yeah, I like Shulk.
Dunban is a really cool character. Fiora is...
Ugh, I hate Fiora.
Whatever.
Like Fiora's entire character is that she wants to bang Shulk. That's her whole character. I just summed up her entire arc. It's literally all it is.
Melia? I think she is pretty cool.
Yeah.
But then you get down to it. Part of her, she does kind of... Just like a kind of love triangle, sort of.
Yeah, she kind of falls into Shulk's little mini harem.
Yeah.
But she was still a pretty good character.
Yeah, pretty good character. The rest basically be irrelevant.
Like Charla, like Charla, whatever. Like just forgettable.
Ryan.
Ryan, I thought I liked him. He was fine.
Like,
but
I feel like if you took away Ryan, Charla, especially Ricky,
fuck Ricky,
the game wouldn't be any worse or better for it.
Yeah. If anything, I actually think taking out Ricky would make the game better.
Oh yeah.
Because, like, so Ricky, his one sole character trait is that he's the comic relief, and like he literally will sometimes clash with serious scenes. Like if you compare it to like Xenoblade 2, who also has a Nopon party member and Tora, but now Tora is also played up for laughs a lot of times. but there's actually more to Tora's character, and even during like a very serious or emotional scene, Tora is he's not like dancing in the background and being goofy, even during a pivotal moment like Ricky does. Like there could be like
the most silly thing about Tora in those scenes is just like the no point way of speaking.
Yeah, that's it. Like, you know, they have a very particular manner of speech, and that's about it. Like, but yeah, like Tora can be serious when the scene calls for it, but Ricky, no matter what's going on, and I do mean no matter what's going on.
Tora at the very least brings an interesting dynamic in that he made an artificial blade, and like the dynamic between him and the artificial blade is interesting, especially in the overall plot of Xenoblade 2, where a main theme of the game is like forming a bond between the blade and their driver, and how like they affect each other, and how a symbiotic relationship can like make them better people, or how like even the loss of one can basically make them hollow, just like how Jin was. And especially an interesting dynamic is between Malos and his driver. See how like his more psychotic and nihilistic traits can be traced back to his driver. So I think like in the context of the game, like Torna and his artificial blade relationship is interesting in that regard. Ricky doesn't really add anything. Fuck Ricky.
Like I said before, I think he takes away from like he kind of ruins certain moments. Whereas Tora, I actually liked Tora as a character. He never annoyed me, and I actually felt for him in certain aspects. And I did like his relationship with his artificial blade Poppy.
Yeah.
And yeah, he was a good character in comparison to Ricky.
Oh my god. We probably feel like we're shitting on Xenoblade Chronicles.
No, I love Xenoblade 1. I always will love 1. But if there's any, there's a couple things that you could. But like, there's no perfect game out there. I could pick apart anything that I love, and I love Xenoblade 1. So, but yeah, I do think that Xenoblade 2 does do certain things better.
Yeah. Oh yeah, the combat Xenoblade 1.
I like it. I think it's great.
I think it's pretty cool. Especially like you say that I think it's a pretty engaging combat system. You can only control Choke, right? If I remember right. No. You can control like each party member, but you have to switch between them.
Yeah,
you can't like order people around, if I remember right.
Yeah, and also you can control anyone you want, but you can't switch mid-battle. So whoever you get into whoever you're controlling, you're stuck with that character for the duration of the battle, which I'm not really a fan of. But
I do think it is fun how each character does feel pretty different from each other when you do control them. Like
they have all very different movesets and uses and pros and cons. And that way you also got to like really think about what your team composition is going to be, because no two characters play the same, which I really like.
Yeah, I do think like it is engaging system just because you have all these different abilities like cooldowns, and you want to use them a particular way in order to maximize the damage you get. And this is especially important since if you don't do that, you're probably dead. And I think Future Sight is an interesting mechanic in terms of it giving you an insight of what might kill you, and like you're giving like a heads up on how to counter it, just because you know what's coming. And I think it's interesting how they did that.
Yeah, like they took like a story element and implemented it into the gameplay, and in a good way. And I liked it. That was good.
And I think like I think Xenoblade 1 does a really good job of emphasizing good positioning. Since like a lot of the more damaging abilities does depend on positioning, as opposed to Xenoblade 2, where most of it is through blade combos. Like there are like positioning skills, but most of their damage is through blade combos in that game, which is good. But Xenoblade 1 positioning system is probably Xenoblade's best in terms of comparing Xenoblade 1 and 2. I don't know. I haven't played Xenoblade Chronicles X. What is it? The other one?
Yeah, Xenoblade X on the Wii U.
Yeah, on the Wii U.
I played very little of it, so.
Oh, yeah. But yeah, overall, I do think it's a pretty good combat system. It's not the best combat system I've played, but it's pretty good though.
Yeah, it's like fast paced and fun. Like that was the thing about Xenoblade 2 that I wasn't a fan of, was the fact that I feel like the combat in that game was super slow compared to the first one, whereas the first one felt like really snappy. But yeah, overall, like combat is really good in Xenoblade 1. Yeah. And there's some pretty good customization too. Like they got like skill trees, which it's super simple, but it's good. And what I like about the skill tree system is the fact that you can link up with other characters to like use their skills and take advantage of that too. So there's a bit of extra customization. I think I think music is like really top notch.
Yep.
Music is like one of the best soundtracks I've heard in a long time.
Engage the enemy. I still remember how that song goes.
I remember like scenes too that go with it, and it's so perfect.
Yeah, confrontation. Mm-hmm. Like the music is just really good in Xenoblade 1.
And also Mechanical Rhythm is another one of my favorite tracks. Like so many tracks I could just listen to on their own without context, and just
Xenoblade 2. Oh boy.
Talk about a divided opinion. Like this game is literally like the definition of love it or hate it, really.
Yep.
Personally, I really like it. I wouldn't say I was surprised because I knew it was going to be good, but like overall, it was a lot better than I thought it was going to be, and I really enjoyed the game. Like I don't think that the story is quite as strong, but I still think that the story is really well done for the most part. I think it's a tad slow to start, but I think it's that type of game where the story gets better and better as you go.
You think it's a tad too slow
okay. To start? Maybe, all right. I was being nice. All right, it's
like I feel like
pretty slow.
Xenoblade 2 is really slow in terms of its startup, especially when it comes to the combat system.
Yeah.
Like I think Xenoblade 2 combat system is really engaging once you get through all the tutorials and stuff.
I think that certain aspects of Xenoblade 2's combat are needlessly convoluted. Like even after I beat the game, I still can't wrap my head around certain things. Like no matter how hard I tried, I could not understand like the elemental orb system. I could not wrap my head around it. I did not understand it, and I was like, oh, an orb came out. Cool. All right, now I could do a chain attack. Nice. Certain things just went over my head, but it's still good. What I really like about the combat is the fact that each character can equip different blades, and depending on the blade you use, your weapon changes, and so does your moveset.
Speaking of blades, what do you think of the game having a gacha system?
Oh. And what's shitty too is that they pull a dick move where every time you try to get a core crystal, or every time you get a blade with a core crystal, it auto saves your game, so you can't like just reload and try again. Like that's it. It's one and done.
They're trying to make it a legitimate gacha experience, man.
It wouldn't be a gacha system if they did pull a dick move like that.
Seriously speaking, I don't think I have much of a problem with it in the overall scheme of things. It does kind of suck how you can't choose which type of blades you get, but then it also makes your playthrough to be interesting and unique in one playthrough compared to the next, I think.
Yeah, like when you beat the game, like if you compare your final save file and your blade collection to another person's blade collection, chances are they're gonna have a pretty different collection by the end of it. And if there's any one thing that's positive too, is the fact that regardless of like the rates of getting the blades that you want, you'll always have, like, by the time you beat the game, you'll have all the blades you really need. Like you're never gonna have you're never gonna run into a wall, because as long as you're getting all the core crystals you can, you'll get like the rare blades, and you just put them on your characters, you'll be fine.
I'll probably say that combat wise, might like Xenoblade 2 more than Xenoblade 1.
I like aspects of it more, but I think that, like I said before, for me it's a tad convoluted in certain respects. So I think that mechanically Xenoblade 2 is probably more interesting, but I had more fun with Xenoblade 1's combat, if that makes sense.
Like I feel like Xenoblade 2 has just more in-depth combat system.
Oh yeah. It definitely does. It I feel like it takes all the best elements of Xenoblade 1 and just like expands on it.
Like, it's been some time since I played Xenoblade 2, but I still remember, like, I did remember how you could do elemental orbs in that game. Still, I didn't find it too convoluted myself. I can't remember anymore since it's like a year since I played it, I think. So yeah, I think I talked a bit about Xenoblade 2's combat system in a tweet. Here, like, I do think the combat's much more fun as you unlock driver art cancels and have enough blades to form blade combos to set up elemental orbs and effective chain attacks, with it being a much more flowing combat system with a lot of combinational attacks in its mix. I think like Xenoblade 2 combinational attacks are like where the game gets really fun, where you combine all these various different attacks together to pull off a very satisfying combo at the end. I will say like Xenoblade 2 in its base game feels more punishing if you mess up an elemental orb combo, just because like there are certain combinations where if you mix up the wrong elements together, it won't produce anything. Unlike in Torna, where even if you mix elemental attack that doesn't mix together into a powerful attack, it still does a combo attack. Why in Xenoblade 2, if you do like an incompatible elemental attack together, nothing basically happens, and it can feel like a waste of that. But I do think like Xenoblade 2, when it's fully upgraded and when you have a good team of blades, you can play through and switch from. It feels like a lot of fun. And I do think like Xenoblade 2 does a better job of implementing its teammates in terms of like there's like a prompt where you can get your teammates to use a specific attack to continue a combo attack in Xenoblade 2. I can't remember if Xenoblade 1 has that or not.
Yeah, I don't remember. I haven't played Xenoblade 1 in a while. Like I've played I played the definitive version, not the whole thing, but a lot of it. Yeah. But even that's been a while.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I was gonna say like once everything comes together in Xenoblade 2, and the combat clicks, it's like really satisfying to pull off. And I do love how all the blades too are different. I love how like depending on the blade a character is using, it changes up not only their weapon but their moveset.
But yeah, I do think I like Xenoblade 2 combat more than Xenoblade 1.
But yeah, I could agree. I think mechanically it's the better game combat wise.
Yeah, I probably do agree it's slower. But once you unlock everything and once you like get like a good team coming up, good team composition, and you have like you unlock driver art combos, driver art cancels, it's a lot of fun to play through. Let's get to the most controversial thing about this game.
What's that?
The anime-ness, man.
Okay, yeah, it definitely leans more into like the anime territory. I agree, especially by Monolith Soft standards. Like even the first game had its anime-ness here and there.
I probably say like, when we say anime-ness, we mean like shonen anime level.
Yeah,
that's what we mean. Because when you get down to it, it's pretty high up there, man.
but I still think it's really well executed.
I would probably say that it can get obnoxious with how shonen it gets in certain parts of the story, but I think it gets better the more you progress into the story.
I feel like the story gradually gets like darker as it goes on too. Like it starts to get more when the stakes get higher, it starts being more serious, like a lot more dramatic, and there's not nearly as much like comedic relief in the later parts of the story as there are early on. So, like, yeah, it definitely feels more shonen anime in comparison to the first game and other Monolith games. But I don't think that ruins the game or anything. I think and I do think it gets better too. Like, there's like different like factions and there's politics involved, and it's actually, when you get down to it, when you finish the game and you look back on it, it's actually a pretty complex story. There's a lot of things going on. There's like a lot of things to keep track of, and it's really like well done, really, for the most part. And I don't think that in contrast to the first game, I don't think it goes like really wild at the end either. It feels like fairly grounded, really.
I would probably say like Xenoblade 2 characters. Stories like its characters. It's more good, I think.
Yeah, character-wise, I think that the second game actually beats out the first one.
Yeah.
Also, I mean, a fairly controversial opinion there too, but yeah, I like the cast more.
Rex is like the weakest character in the game, I think. But he's still
like he's likable. He's all right. I didn't dislike him.
He's likable in that shonen protagonist type of way, I guess. He's also hateable in that sort of way. That's sort of scene. I love you and all you guys. But I do think the rest of the cast is pretty good, and they do feel relevant throughout the game, I feel.
Like
yeah. You got Nia, who's like, I don't know if I should spoil this or not, but like she has like ties to Jin in interesting ways, I feel.
And that's the thing too, is like even like the antagonists in Xenoblade 2 are pretty good for the most part.
Yeah, Jin, who's like a major antagonist in the game, and she has a just interesting dynamic due to her true nature, shall we say? Morgan Morgan is interesting too, I think. She's just
I like her character.
She's just badass, man.
She's just a badass chick.
Yeah. We talked about Tora before, and how he's relevant in terms of his relationship with Pulpa, his artificial blade, and how it coincides with the themes of dualism being two beings, with like between a blade and the driver, and how it's interesting how he forms his bond with Pulpa, being that she's artificial blade who doesn't really need him as a driver. But then, like, Tora does, like, help Pulpa develop into, like, the character she is, especially at the end.
Like, it's that relationship that you have that they both, like, kind of, like, develop because of each other.
Yeah.
Which was nice and touching.
Yeah.
And you got Zeke, who is one of my favorite characters.
Yeah.
He's kind of like the Rhine of the game in a way, but he has much more.
Yeah, he feels much more significant within the context of Xenoblade 2, especially since he has ties to Amothus. Yeah, especially at the end.
So I think that Xenoblade 2 does a better job of tying its main characters to like the grand scheme of things, which the first game doesn't do nearly as well.
Yeah. I think they are really cool characters for the most part. The only questionable one is Rex and maybe Tora, if you're not into that kind of character.
Yeah, which understandable if some people aren't into like a mascot character like Tora. But like we mentioned before, but like when I compare Tora to Ricky, it's like not even a contest. Like I liked Tora way more. And the blade characters are interesting too. Like not talking about like the blades that you get from the gameplay, but like in the main story, like the blade characters. Because really, when you get down to it, there's really like I want to say like 11 main characters in the main story that are relevant to the main story. Because after you got 5 human characters and they each have a blade, except for Rex, who has technically 2, Pyra and Mithra, and so it's a pretty large cast when you get down to it. But they all feel like really defined.
But I probably say Pyra and Mithra is like pretty much a main character in the game too.
Yeah, like them two, and also Rex. I feel like are like the you know,
a trilogy.
Yeah, something like that.
Despite how childish the story is, I feel in Xenoblade 2, it does get pretty serious. Especially since it delves into themes of nihilism, it's sort of, in terms of going with Malos's motives for wanting to do this. And even and that nihilism even relates to Mithra and Pyra, sort of, in terms of what they want to do. Like what their goal is in reaching, to go to the World Tree and meet their father.
But, like it's like the story definitely starts off very like lighthearted, but it gradually becomes like more dramatic and actually like fairly dark later on too. Like, so I think like if you look at like the later parts of the game compared to the early parts of the game, tonally like almost like polar opposites, really. So like it starts off.
But I do think the game does a good job of gradually going to that tone and story shift, I think.
Like it's not like a one moment where it's like a 180 from super light to super dark or anything like that, but like the more the plot unveils and the more like things come to light and revelations and stuff, that's when you could see the game really start to like show its true colors. So overall, I think that despite a pretty slow start, I think that the main story is like really well done.
And overall, and exploration, I think it's really strong too in Xenoblade 2.
Yeah. Like there's not as many areas as there are in the first game.
I would probably say Xenoblade 2 doesn't have like a connected world like Xenoblade 1, since like the world of Xenoblade 1 is connected by 2 dead titans who are connected by like their weapons killing each other. And the way you traverse through those 2 titans is through those weapons as you cross them like bridges. But in Xenoblade 2, it's again on beings called titans, but they're mostly just like really, really giant animals that you can ride that people made their homes on. And
they literally live on their backs.
Live on their backs. And like and there's like ways to travel between them via ships, which wasn't I guess the word thing, but not like it was like limited to a faction in Xenoblade 1, and 2. There's pretty much a worldwide economic community in that game as compared to Xenoblade 1, where Mechonis, Bionis pretty much are at war with each other and pretty much keep to themselves until they fight. You know, that sort of stuff.
Yeah.
But due to the setting of Xenoblade 2, like Xenoblade 2 areas are separated into like various zones rather than being connected together like in Xenoblade 1.
Yeah, from a story perspective, it's understandable and it makes sense. Like it doesn't. I don't think that the world feels disconnected because of that. It's just, you know, it's a different way of doing things. I don't think it's like necessarily better or worse.
Yeah.
And the areas themselves are also like really well. They're handcrafted and varied, and I enjoyed all the areas. I'd say like just as much as I did in the first game.
I would probably say one low point of the exploration is probably like the blade points in the game, where you need to have certain blades in order to remove an obstacle in Xenoblade 2. While in Xenoblade 1,
also they need to have like certain field skills at certain levels.
Yeah.
And sometimes you'll have the skill, but you don't have the blade equipped, so you gotta equip it on one of your
exploration can be a bit more annoying in Xenoblade 2 as compared to 1, where you can just traverse anywhere. Like you can't go anywhere, just like going straight to it. You might need to make a detour or go through like a pathway, but you can at least go there without any obstacles blocking you, except for like a really strong enemy who might one hit KO you if you're in the wrong area. Speaking of that, I probably say Xenoblade 2 has one of the most egregious high level enemy mob that's positioned in the game.
Did it? Okay. Wait, where?
The gorilla in the first area.
Oh my god, yeah. What the hell is that about?
like, I don't mind high-level mobs just killing you if you traverse in this off-beaten path where you're not meant to. I think that's fair. Thing is, in Xenoblade 2, that guy's just like, it's so nearby the main road.
Yeah, so it's not like easily avoidable, so you're like...
I think we talked about this before, but I do think, like, we talked about the blade system. I do like how varied the blades are in terms of how different they function gameplay-wise. The game also does a great job of making each, at least the unique blades, to feel very distinctive from each other. Not only for their abilities, but also for their character personalities and stories, too.
Yeah, like even little things like when they're fighting and they have all like varied dialogue and stuff, you could feel their personality shine.
Yeah. Like Xenoblade 2 does a really good job of making each blade feel like their own character, rather than just like something you just use for battle.
Mm-hmm.
Oh yeah, and Xenoblade 2 has a bunch better antagonists than Xenoblade 1.
Yeah, like I think Malos was a really like he felt like a constant threat and a real menace, and I liked most of the characters.
I feel like a lot of the antagonists are better than Xenoblade 1, just because they do feel like actual characters, rather than Xenoblade 2 where they feel just like
Saturday morning cartoon villains.
Yeah. Also, fuck Zanza. Zanza sucks so much.
Yeah, he's not the best. I think something about Xenoblade 2 that I want to put is I gushed about the soundtrack of the first game, but I actually think Xenoblade 2's soundtrack is even better.
I think they're on par with each other.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Like I think it's really down to preference. Like in terms of like just sheer composition quality, they're equal. Yeah. But I think I preferred slightly the soundtrack of 2. I think it's it's gorgeous. It's one of the best soundtracks I've ever heard. Just like the first one. The first one is also a god tier 10 out of 10 soundtrack, but Xenoblade 2 also like absolutely just. And I gotta give special shout out to the theme for More Ardain.
Mm-hmm. I do feel like Xenoblade 2 Chronicles soundtrack is really good.
Mm-hmm.
Especially like in the cutscene music as well.
Yeah. Some really like powerful pieces during those scenes. Like that there was that one song. What was it called? There's a song called Counterattack, which sounds like almost like a remix of Engage the Enemy from the first game.
I probably like in terms of comparing Engage the Enemy and Counterattack, I do think Engage the Enemy is better in terms of a song that's dramatic for the game. But I do think like Xenoblade 2 probably has more varied cutscene music that's almost as good.
Yeah. And even then, like, I think on its own, Counterattack is still a really great track. Yeah. If you don't,
I think, is that all?
Yeah, I don't think we have anything left to cover for Xenoblade 2, to be honest.
Yeah. So that's all the Operation Rainfall games, plus one more game, since it's a sequel to one of the Operation Rainfall games.
Yeah, so I figure might as well cover it here.
Yeah. But overall, I think in the Operation Rainfall games, overall, are good games. It's just like once the quality is just a bit mixed compared to the other. The last story. I think the last story is like the worst of the Operation Rain. That doesn't mean I think it's bad. I just think it's the weakest. Then Pandora's Tower, then Xenoblade Chronicles 1. What about you? Oh, you can only compare last story and Xenoblade, right?
Yeah. I between those two, Xenoblade definitely beats it out by a very large margin. But I will say, talking about it made me want to get out my Wii and check out Pandora's Tower, just so I can have some finality with Operation Rainfall, because only finished two of them. So.
I think that's all for today's episode.
Yeah, I think so.
It wasn't as long. It wasn't as long as the Xeno Saga episode last week.
Mm-hmm.
Not last week, last time. But I had more to talk about Xeno Saga just because I played that much more recently than the Operation Rainfall games.
Mm-hmm. And plus, there's only two of us here as opposed to when we had Forrest with us.
Well, that's all for today. Hope you guys enjoyed it. This is Peter 7890 Sirus signing off.
Take care, everyone.